Alright everybody, I am going to make a video about putting the wiring harness together on this Pathfinder that I am building. I'm right in the middle of several videos, but my arm, I think I've thrown out a muscle or something in my arm. I'm going to do something a little bit easier. So I'm going to get this wiring harness put together, I hope. And try to get that put down there without scratching my booster. Fun stuff putting these back together without scratching them. Anyway, so I may end up having to build something to hold this airline up so that it doesn't flop. Different things that I'm going to have to do. But I'm going to pull the harness around. I've got where the harness can come through here, and then hopefully I can go around in there or somewhere. And the front will bolt in when I'm done, and I'll finish cleaning all of that up at that point. And then the harness on this side comes through right here. I believe it used to come through here, but I've moved it. Maybe it was on that side, I don't remember. I've done so much to this now, but pretty much I've documented everything in these videos as I've built this. So this is a 4-cylinder that I'm putting in the Pathfinder. So this is a 97 Nissan pickup motor and transmission. It is a 5-speed. This was an automatic, but it is now going to be a 5-speed. So all that being said, I need the body harness for the Pathfinder, and I need the truck harness for the driveline. And I was wading through this in another video that I think I loaded on here, and ended up, I just decided I would use pigtails off of the Pathfinder harness for the doors. I'll show you the doors. I no longer need door locks, so all I need is power windows, but I will have to add this. Is a 4-button remote from, I thought this, I guess it's from AVS. Forgot who I ordered this from. It obviously is from AVS. This will do 8 different functions with 4 buttons. If you hold one button down for a few seconds, it will do a secondary function. My plan is I can open all 4 doors with the remote separately, and then if I hold the button down, I'm going to see if I can wire that into the power window to make each window roll down individually. I thought that would be kind of neat, and I'm going to have the ability to do that fairly easy. And there is my shave door harness, and these are a little bit more costly, but I thought this would simplify my build. It's going to be a little bit neater than if I'd done it myself, and it's going to save me a ton of time versus building it myself. This will almost be plug and play. I will have a few wires, and they are labeled where they need to go. This is going to be very easy to put in. And then a friend of mine on Facebook said that he was having trouble putting these in his doors, so I will see if I can get them in my doors. If he's having trouble, there's a good chance I will as well. But I'll see if I can get those in the doors without binding up. I think his cable was going to be rubbing on the window or something. And my doors are shaved. I've got them laid in here, and hopefully not getting dented. This side is not painted yet, but they are perfectly shaved. This was pretty much ready for paint once I brought it in here. This back handle is up in here. The front doors are the same. They are shaved. Back side is painted. see if I can wiggle my way in over here. And no door handle. That's ready to go, ready for paint. And I will put the doors on after I get some of this wiring harness pulled through where it needs to go. Turn these lights off out here. Alright, and so what I did is I took a 97 Nissan pickup truck that I had. I took it all apart and took this harness, and it was going to be my donor. I don't know what this is. It's been 2 months. I may end up having to look back at my previous video to figure out some of this, but I do have a lot of this labeled whenever I took it out of the other truck. That goes to the brake pedal. It's different things I've labeled where everything went. I don't even know what this is. Parking brake. I don't know if that's going to reach the parking brake. I guess it will. Anyway, so I have labeled all of this, and we'll kind of go through and figure out a way to route these wires. And this is the throttle cable, so I will pull it into the through the firewall here, and just start trying to weed through some of this. There's a whole bunch of wires, but if you take this one at a time, you will be able to do this. That's what I keep telling myself anyway. So I'm not a professional. I'm just working in my backyard here, trying to do something. And I am very, very tired. I'm very burnt out. But I have to push through this. There's a car show coming that I'm really trying to get to. This needs to be completely done in about 3 weeks. And I seriously doubt I'm going to be able to do that because I am by myself out here. That was not the throttle cable. That was the hood prop, or the hood opener. But that does have to go up there. I tucked all this up in here because I was in here spraying bed liner and sealing this floor up, and I didn't want to get it all over my wiring. I'm going to lay some of this out off camera, and I will cut you back on in just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and get this one out of the way, literally out of my way. So this grommet will go right here in the body, and so I'm going to have to weed all of this through that hole, but I don't need all of this stuff, so I'm going to look at this. That is the analog brakes, and this goes to the fuel pump. So this one to the fuel pump is going to need to be lengthened because my fuel pump is way back there now. So I'm going to cut some of this wire loom back. I'm going to remove this plug for the ABS. I don't have that. I don't need that. I don't want that. This is analog brakes, and I don't have that. I'm going to remove those wires. This will go to the taillights. I've got those labeled drivers and passengers. So of course I'm going to need that, but those will have to be altered because I'm running Cadillac taillights. So I can unplug those here and leave those back there, and I will plug that back up later. I'm just going to take a razor knife and I will start cutting back. I'll take some dikes to some angle cutters or something and cut these off. And then I'll start weeding through this small harness and removing and lengthening the wires that I need, and I'll show you what I'm doing there. This here should be pretty much what I need to get in there. Just a knife, I might need a pick, and a pair of dikes, and if it gets real serious I can just snip off a bunch of wires at once. But I'm going to remove basically all the way back up to here because I don't need this ABS plug here. So anyway, it's a lot of work here, so I'll just tear right off into it here. Okay, so what we've got now is the wires that I need to be lengthened. I can cut these. There's only a few of these, and the only ones that really are even close to the same color are these yellows. They should have a different color stripe. This one has a black stripe or brown, and that one has a green stripe, so I can easily identify those two. So I can cut these now, and I can plug this into my fuel tank back there, and then figure out the length that I need and the way that I need to route these in the frame or beside the frame. This one here is for the ABS, and what I'm going to do is I will just cut this back, and I can tape up where the wiring is, and I will stagger the ends of these so they don't ever touch. I can cut this one here and then come about a half an inch or so, and then cut this one here and come another half an inch and cut that one there. And whenever I tape those back up, I don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to try to separate them out from the rest of the harness. I don't think that's going to be a big deal, just to remove that. And possibly I might even be able to use some of this for a activate a relay or something. There's possibly a keyed positive in here. I can probe some of these before I tape that back up, and if there's a wire that I think that I might like, I could just pull it out of the harness and tape it up separate, maybe put a label on it. That way I can pinpoint it easier, or put a yellow zip tie or something like that on there where I can find it. If I wanted to put some kind of neons underneath, that would give me a trigger wire for a relay. And these thick gray ones right here, I'm going to cut back. That is a shielding. There is probably at least 2 wires inside of each one of these. This goes to the anti-lock brakes. That was at the very back of the truck. I'm certain that was on the rear axle, and I'm not going to run any of that. It says emissions, anti-lock brakes and emissions, so it most likely went to the charcoal canister, which I am deleting. There's a black wire with a green stripe on that as well. I'm just going to cut that back here, and I don't want any of these wires touching. I will note that I don't have a battery hooked up anywhere in this harness. It is a dead harness, so I'm not going to fry anything. But if you had your battery hooked up and you were to cut into this, and one of these is positive and one of these is negative, it will arc, and it could cause a problem. So keep that in mind, because these are metal, and if you cut into a wire that is hot against a wire that is negative, it will arc. So then we'll move on back here. This goes to the taillights. These were cut, and I'm not sure why. I can probe these. Hopefully I will have a brake light, a tail light, a left blinker, and there's some more right here. Hopefully I'll have like a right blinker or something. where I can hook into this and make it real easy to wire in a trailer, because I do plan on having a trailer attachment with the 7-pin back here. I plan on pulling a very small trailer. It's not going to be much. I don't want to let that cat out of the bag just yet. But, and then this shouldn't have to be modified really at all. Other than this is probably the lights for the license plate, and there's 2 of them. I don't know, I forget. I might have to go back and look at a truck. I've got plenty of trucks to look at, so I'll try to make this as descriptive as possible and show you everything, every step that I take, so that you will be able to go through this. And also, this is a 97 harness. A 95 harness might be different. This might be a brown wire instead of a yellow wire. They change a lot over the years, so I don't know, maybe even mid-year they might change. So I don't know about that, but I do know that we should be able to get this working, and for the most part it should help somebody if they needed to do this to theirs. So I will go and start cutting these back and removing what I know I don't need, and I'll cut you back on later. Okay, I just left that open. If I don't like these wires for anything, then I'll just tape them up. Same goes for these. I just cut this back and cut these wires, and if I don't think I'll need those for anything, I'll just tape them up. Now I'm ready to extend my wires for my fuel pump. I'm going to leave plenty of room for heat shrink tubing to be placed all the way back here, so that the wire doesn't get hot all the way back there and collapse my heat shrink tubing. And I will be soldering and heat shrinking all of these together. With all of the plugs out of there, it was super easy just to guide it through the hole and put the grommet in place. And now, underneath, I will have to lay on my back and get under here and clean all of that up and re-wire loom that. But that is all to be expected. I went ahead and peeled my label off and put it on these wires so that I would not get those mixed up. That goes to the fuel pump. I'm going to lengthen these at this point and then put it with this harness and see how far back it goes and see where I can route that up on the frame. Try to make it just as solid as I can make it. I do not want any of these to come loose. I'll see what I can do. I really don't want to just zip tie it, so I'll see what I can do with it. Before I do anything, I'm gonna strip back this so I got about that much bare wire so that I can twist them together. And I've got these cut. That is my heat shrink. And I had to go get a new soldering iron. I have this one. It works pretty good, but I can't find the fuel for it. You have to put some fuel in the back, and I have no idea where that's at. So my other one is messed up, so I went and got that one. And I couldn't find my solder, so I went to town and got my solder that I need. I just got a small diameter. It's almost too small, but it'll work. And then I had heat shrink tubing, and I had some tape. This Scotch tape, this is 88. There's a Super 33 or a Super 88. One's a little bit thicker than the other. You can see on the inside, most of the time they'll have what it is in here. I'm actually not seeing it on that one. That one's a 3M. Anyway, this one is a rubber. This is some pretty nice stuff right here. This rubber one, it'll stretch and you can kind of shape it. So anyway, I've got all of those, and hopefully this, I just now turned it on and I don't know why it's blinking, and I really don't want to read that. So I'm just gonna see if it gets hot here in a minute. While I'm waiting on that, I'm going to make sure to slide this down my wire first. If you do not slide that down your wire and you don't have an end that is open, I'd have to pull all these spools back here and cut them to length, and then slide my tube all the way up to the other end to where I soldered. And sometimes you will forget, and sometimes you might end up having to unsolder that and then slide your tube on and then solder it back. So it's kind of a pain if you forget that. So try not to forget that. And got these cutters are a lot better. I got these, and I was able to find these. These are really nice. Harbor Freight's got these. They stay sharp. They're real nice. That's what I use to strip my plastic back. And then these are the colors that I've chosen. I have a blue and a white and a brown and a green and a black and a pink. So the obvious ones, blue and white. And I'm gonna pick one of these black ones with a green stripe for the green and just kind of go with that. And then once I get to the other end back here, I will have to probably just look and see what I did here and then go with that so that I don't get them mixed up. This thing is still blinking, but it's hot. It's ready to go. I guess blinking is ready. Alright, I'm going to start putting this on the wire and get that prepped up and ready to go. So I just take the tube and I put it up here and I bend my wire so it doesn't slide back down. And then I take them and I twist them together like this. That's how I was taught in school in auto mechanics. And I'm just going to do that to all of these. Just put them together about halfway and start twisting one side and then start twisting the other side. And then that's ready to solder. Then when it cools off, we'll slide the tube down and get it positioned over that, and then use the heat gun, and then that'll be ready to go. It doesn't really take long to do this, and this is definitely the professional way. It's not a crimp connector or anything like that. This is a very nice connection that will last for years. I've got them all twisted together, and I've got this block of wood right here that I'm going to solder against, and I just bend my wires to where they're gonna kind of stay down on that wood, and then it'll work really quick. Just get that wire warm. Let's see if I can do this while I'm videoing. I may have to edit this part out because this may not work. I may have to get a tripod in order to show you. I'm going to place that on that wire and get that wire warm. It'll take it a minute. Sometimes you can dab this on there. You want to solder into the wire, not onto the tip. I may have to turn my machine up. This is the first time that I've used this. I've got ceiling fans on in here, and that actually might be cooling my wire down. I'm going to turn my machine up and turn my ceiling fans off. A block of wood will soak up a little bit of the heat. I'll let that wire get a little warm. There it is. Soaking right in. And that stuff, when it starts melting, it will go toward the heat. Let that wire get hot on this side. And start trying to solder down here. There we go. Alright, and that's how you do it. Hopefully I videoed it good enough. I'm going to do these other 5 off camera so that I can just get it done. With just a couple minutes work, I got all these done, and they're ready to go with the heat shrink tubing. So hopefully you've remembered to put those on the wires here, and what we're going to do is slide it down and try to center it up over the solder, and then it's magic whenever you put heat on it. The gun has to get a little bit warm, but as soon as it gets warm, that heat shrink tubing will seal up. That is it. Now that connection is ready to go. I do these other 5 wires that way, and then ended up having to pull this back out just so I could sit over here on the floor and do this on this block of wood. So I'm going to pull it all back down, figure out where these need to go on the frame, and I'll crawl underneath and figure out some kind of clamp, and we'll go from there. This tape says Super 33 on the inside. I don't know which is thicker, the 88 or the 33. I've got both. They both work really good. And then I've got some Scotch. It works good too. It's really wide. I don't know what model number or whatever that is. But anyway. What I'm going to do is tape up all of these wires just to try to hold them together and keep them organized. And then once I get a few feet of this done, I will pull it through the hole. I'll put the grommet back in, and then I'll be underneath, and I can start pulling it some more and wrapping up all of the wiring. I'll leave some of this open. I'm not going to sheath this just yet. I'll just have it to where I can get it on the frame and clamp it, and then run some sheathing on after I figure out what these wires are and if I want to keep them or if I want to try to block those off. Also these I'll do the same way, and I'll do these the same way. Possibly just block those off, tape them in, and then I'll put my wire loom on after that. I got the harness all taped up, and now I'm following the frame on the inside, and I'm gonna go over my air rod, go up over my C-notch, and I will figure out a way to mount that permanent up in there. Here is my fuel tank, and here is my fuel pump wires. So I put my plug on, and here is the pigtail that I've got coming out of that. It will go over to here fairly easy. So with my harness up here where I needed it, I taped up to the end and cut my wires there. Now all I have to do is strip these back and connect this pigtail to the proper colors. And then I will solder that and heat shrink that the same as I did up there, and then figure out how to route this back here to the back. But actually I'm not going to route that just yet. I need to wire loom that, but before I wire loom that, I need the battery hooked up, and I need to probe these. I need to decide what these are and if I want to keep those or cover those. And I've got plenty to do. I've got all the rest of this harness to build, so I will get in on this once I get this connector put on, and I'll just leave this draped over the axle back here in the back. But for now I'm going to pull it over where I can get to it. Just a lot of back and forth. I had to pull it to get the wire length correct. And now I have to pull it back out so that I don't have to lay down on my back and solder and heat shrink all this back together. So I'm going to slide my flammable paint, and it shouldn't catch fire. It's not like open flame. So I'm going to solder all these together, and I may turn this air conditioner on because it's getting warm in here. I'll cut you back on. Okay, I spent a little bit of time in here. What I've done is everything on the other side of this grommet, I pulled through the hole that I've got. I made that hole, I remember now. And so I tried to make it to where I could fit it up through here and try to tuck this harness where you don't see most of it. It's going to be, I'm going to have to put some kind of bracket here to hold that, to keep these wires from being pulled tight. But we'll get to that. Get to that after a while. So that's your wiper motor, of course. So I've just plugged that in with the plugs, and then I ran the harness over and plugged in everything to the engine. Most of these plugs will only go in where they're supposed to go in. The exception is all of the fuel injection. These are your fuel injectors, and I think they'll pretty much plug in to all of them. So you just have to make sure you get those in the right order. The only ones really that you would possibly get confused is number 3 and 4 right here. But I just looked at how my wires were pre-bent and used that. The exception is this one looks identical. That goes to the EGR, but it is on a different leg. So that leg goes down over there, and that will reach the EGR. This leg all stays up here by the injectors. That's going to be what you need. So I am removing all of the EGR, all of the emissions. I'm going to have to repaint this. It doesn't look right. But anyway, so I've got all these hooked up. I came around here and hooked all of this up. This is stuff that I'm going to need. Also, I need to find where my O2 sensor is supposed to plug in. Most likely it will be in this wiring harness here. That will have to go in. So one of these plugs should go, yep, rear O2 sensor. I'm not going to need that one. The rear one just tells if the catalytic converter is working or not. It'll make your check engine light come on. Now I've got right here, this is broken. It's supposed to go to this plug. That is some kind of temperature, air intake temperature sensor. I think I'm just going to not run that. I'll just tuck that plug, zip tie it up in there somewhere. You don't really need that. I was gonna try to run it, but I don't even think it's worth trying to put the pigtail back in. Down here I do have a wire that is broken right here that goes underneath your oil filter. Will be your oil pressure sensor, and that is needed. I will have to put that back on. I'll have to find the pigtail for that. I'm going to tighten all these right here on the alternator. I'm going to tighten all that up. And I've got the starter down here. I'm going to have to tighten up. I've got all of the plugs in place down here, but the starter wire, the big wire going to the starter, is loose. So before I try to start it, I'll have to do that. I'm going to go ahead and mount this where it's supposed to go. That way I will know my length of the wires, and I can put loom back and get it cleaned up the best that I can. Now that's your ground. Some of these grounds are going to have to go to the frame and to the engine and to the battery. My battery is back here. I'm not going to have a battery in the front unless this one acts goofy where it's not sending enough power to the front, and then I will get a small battery. I've got what it is. It's not quite a battery, but not quite a capacitor. Just really, really small battery. And I've cut all of this loom back. And these plugs will go into these plugs. I've cut all this wiring back so that I can tell what's going where. That is going to be a ground. I'll have to find a spot to ground some of this stuff. I can lengthen, shorten these wires, whatever I need to do. And this one is for the AC. It needs to be left up here in the front. Labeling these has really helped me out. I wish that I'd labeled more, because I do have this plug and I have these two plugs. I'm almost certain that these go to emissions. I've also got this one is obviously the EGR, and I've got another one right here. I'm pretty sure that was emissions. This square one, it's got 4 wires, I believe. Yeah, that will go over here. That's your idle air control valve. And what's the other one? Idle air control, and there's something else right there. Forget. Throttle positioning, maybe? No? Yeah, that's throttle position. No, there's throttle positioning. I'll see if I can figure out what these are. Forget. But anyway, so your mass airflow right here, plug that in. You need that. And this green one, what did it go to? I've got another truck. It's dark. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And I'll just look at it in the daylight. Figure out what some of these others go to and start. Well, I'm going to start the engine. And then once I get it running and know that it's going to run good, then I will start removing what I don't need. This, I will have to find a good spot to mount that. I'm tempted just to put it behind the fender, like right here on there. If the fender will still fit, and that will cover right there. If the cover and everything will fit. And I'll pause you for a second. My wife's hollering. Alright, and so if the fender will cover that, I'm tempted to put it there, even though that will be very hard to get to if I need to work on it. I need to find a ground for this. And then these will go to the very front. This is for the lights and the air conditioner, headlight, parking light, and turn signal. So that will just follow on right here where this bolts in. I will just make it follow down. It'll go in behind the fender or something. And then I will start in with this harness. I'm going to get all of this stuff kind of plugged in, routed, and then run a cable, big cable, 2 gauge, 2 or 3 gauge. I may have to follow the frame with a power cable. That I believe is 2 gauge. That would definitely be sufficient. Don't know if I can follow here and come through. That is split at this point, so I would be able to run a cable through that. We'll just have to figure that out, but I think I can probably just run a positive up here and not a negative. I think the frame should be sufficient for a ground. We'll try it and see, I guess. It's always worked in the past for me. This EGR, not EGR, this O2 sensor will have to be plugged in for it to run correctly. So I will be pulling this harness through next. And we will see if we can get this thing started tomorrow. I'll cut you back on. I'm not 100% certain what this goes to. That'll be on the driver's side firewall somewhere, fender well area. This, I've got a O2 sensor and a rear O2 sensor. So I'm going to cut into this and remove the wiring for the rear and just plug in my front one. And be this one. That plugged in right here, maybe. All right, and driver's parking light, that will go up front. This headlight, and probably it goes to the horn. That one will probably go to the side marker or the turn signal. That one's the side marker, parking light. This, I'm almost certain something is supposed to plug into this right here. I need to look at this. Oh, I've got it labeled. Windshield washer, I don't need that. Okay, this should have plugged into the brake master cylinder somewhere, but I'm not seeing anything on mine. I don't know what I've got going on right here. I don't know if I've got the wrong plug, because Pathfinder or 95 year model is different than 97. I'm not sure really. Have to get back with you on that, and I can go ahead and hook this up that will be a vacuum leak. It won't run right. So this is one of your only vacuum lines that you need. You need maybe 2 or 3 vacuum lines. You'll need one going to your fuel pump. Not your fuel pump. Your fuel pressure regulator. So I've got the fuel pressure regulator vacuum line is going right here on the front of the throttle body. And then fuel lines. There's a couple of vacuum lines right here going to the throttle body. One goes, oh, that's a water line. That's a water line. I'm getting very, very tired. So that's your water tube. It's not a vacuum line. This vacuum line I've got going up here, but we're not going to be running that sensor. I don't even really need that vacuum line right there going to the bottom of the intake, air intake. I can plug that. It doesn't feel real good. You can start filling these, and if they feel kind of gummy or brittle, it's not good. So I'll probably end up pulling this off from right here on this throttle body on the side, and I will most likely just put a cap over that, and then we will have the vacuum line going from here, this side of the throttle body. That will go to the brake booster. Hook that up. So I guess maybe 2 vacuum lines, brake booster, and fuel pressure regulator. Possibly the only 2 fuel line or vacuum lines that we will need. I'm gonna have to just call it a night and pick back up in the morning on some of this. That's where we're at. It's almost ready to start. I'm gonna go ahead and go underneath it and run some of these wires. Those go to the front. I've got some wires that go back to the transmission. That might be where these go. I'm going to do that tomorrow. Most likely that is where those go. It's a 5-speed. It doesn't need much. That will be like a speedometer and probably a neutral safety switch, and probably a reverse light. And there was 3 plugs, so that is probably what that is. These most likely are emissions, and I see some bare wire right here. Those are going to get removed anyway if it's emissions, which most likely all of this is emissions. And this should be the battery positive, and then these will plug in to this. This should be up close to your battery. Alright, so I'll just try to get bent over here. I need to go in, take me a nap, and I will get back tomorrow on this. Make sure that this will start before I start removing any of these plugs. Should be pretty straightforward, honestly. Looks like a mess, but it's not really that bad. Just got to get in here and take one plug at a time, label them if you need to, and then get them the length that you want, and you can tuck them I can even run this around behind the motor if I wanted to, at least this one, and clean up right here on the front. I may just find a pretty wire loom and loom that a little bit better, but you can kind of do what you want to on this and clean it up. So I will get back with you in just a little bit. This is my daughter's 97 Nissan. So what we're going to do is follow back this harness. So here are some of the plugs that we were looking at. And we're going to follow this back. We got a couple right here that go somewhere. Goes into that. I don't remember having that on that other harness. But we've got this black one here. We've got a gray one here. Another gray one here. All that is emissions. I don't recall what that is. That goes, the other one has got it mounted up here. That is for the wiper delay, where you turn it on and it will wipe and then pause and then wipe again. And your factory has the front and rear O2 sensor mounted like this. We're keeping the front, deleting the rear. I don't think we had anything else on this side. We're just concerned about under here on this side. Let me pull this off and then we'll look under it. So under here we have some EGR and we also have some swirl valve controls. This one, that might go to the EGR because it's got a line going back here. It gets confusing, but we don't need that one. Let's see. There's some plugs that goes here. We're not going to need any of that. That square one right there, I was wondering what it went to. Goes to some kind of emission. I'm just going to go ahead and take all of that off. I think I'm going to go ahead and try to get the fuel system put together and the battery put together and see if we can get that vehicle to start. Alright, I decided I've got to get this steering column in so that I can have the key and everything else hooked up and see if this thing will start at that point. There is a few other things that I've got to do, but this is one of them. And this is not factory, so I cut it out a while back to raise this up to help with this body drop. I painted it and I should have let that paint cure good before I tried to stick this in there. Getting it around all of these brake pedals and gas pedal and all is a freaking nightmare. But I didn't really feel like pulling all of this back out, risk scratching it. So this is what I'm doing. It's been modified right here because my shock absorber was kind of in the way. And I tried to put some new foam after welding that to help with water and air coming into the cab. And there is 4 bolts, and I'm going to try to get those put up on those 4 bolts. And I've got some nuts here, got my wrench with an extension, and see if I can get this lined up. This is the 4th time I've tried to put it in. Where my floor comes in here was hitting here, so I ground that down some, and once I got it to fit a little bit better, then I added the foam, and we'll see if I can get it bolted in this time. And it's gonna have to bolt in right here. I'll have to locate some bolts for that. It might be these, I'm not real sure. Yeah, that'll work. I'll just use that. That's actually what I'm supposed to be bolting my doors in with, so I might have something over here. We'll look around. These two appear to be really good. I'll put those in. Alright, I will cut you back on here in just a minute. Okay, it appears that the back side of this is a different plug than what I've got. I'm either going to have to rewire a pigtail onto this, which means a lot of investigating on what the colors are for on each year with a factory service manual, hopefully online. Or I can possibly try to remove this and replace it with one off of like a regular truck, hardbody truck. I want to keep this column. This is a tilt. It is a jump tilt, I think is what they call it. It's got the jump. You can push it up to adjust the tilt, or pull it down to make it jump all the way up. And it's kind of special. I want to keep that. But anyway, I got this all put together. That was not fun. I still got to attach it here, but we will get to that in a little bit. And I think I'm ready to try to start this thing. See if I can get this fuel pump to kick on and a few other things. I'm pretty sure this one goes to the airbag or something. I'm not 100% certain on that. This computer on the passenger side should be the one that controls the engine. I'm going to try to weed through some of that as I go. I just turned the key on and I didn't get anything to the fuel pump, so I'm gonna have to go through some of this and figure out what I've done wrong. I bet what I've done wrong is I've not connected the engine to a ground. I probably don't have a good ground. All I've got is a body ground. So I'm gonna put in a ground to the engine, and I'm gonna put in a ground to the frame. But I'm burning my candle at both ends. This is my weekend off. I'm gonna have to go over to a house and work on wiring up an outbuilding. It shouldn't be too hard. She said that one of her outlets is messing up, and it's an outside outlet, probably got water in it. But anyway, make a buck. So I will cut you back on probably later today. We'll see if we can get this fuel pump to kick on. And I don't know if I posted on here yet a video of this is, it feels like heavy gauge 4. If it's 2, I'd be surprised. It's probably it's at least oxygen free copper. But anyway, I've got it going over to my battery positive, got it going over to this, and this is a fuse holder, and I've got right here, each one of those is 100 amp, so I've got 200 amps before I blow those fuses together. And then so 200 amps should go, and this is pretty ghetto sketchy, but for now we are going to do that. I may wrap a towel around this, and I may have to vice grip that, or actually put an end on that and connect it solid. Anyway, and I still have to hook this in. I may go out to one of my other trucks and see if I can grab this pigtail. I'm almost 100% certain that that is going to go to the oil pressure sender. Everything else should be good to go. Just get them grounds. I may put a bolt here going through, and then that should be a really good ground to the frame, going all the way through the frame. And then I can connect it to this. I'll have to probably bore that out bigger. And that goes up to the motor here. I could spin this around and connect it to the frame here, and it wouldn't be terribly an eyesore. It's a little bit of an eyesore, but I can maybe hide it some, and it should be decent. And then I can connect onto this and go maybe over to the battery just to make sure we're good. It might be overkill, but the battery will also have to go to the frame. I really don't want to drill a hole in this box. I may just try to go through like this grommet, and then I can come down and connect to the frame down here. And I could probably go through these tubes that I've got my airline ran through and go up to the engine that way. That might be good. 4 gauge would be plenty, I'm sure, because I've got some 4 gauge black. This is copper clad aluminum. It's not nearly as good as oxygen free copper, but we will have the frame carrying it, we will have the body carrying it. The engine will be connected to both. I can connect it to the body onto the firewall. And anyway, alright, I'll just have to cut you back on later. So I've deleted all the emissions, and this right here bracket was mounted right there, and I took that off, and it cleaned up this area a little bit. Now what I've done is hooked up my fuel lines. So what I did is I turned on my fuel pump, which I will go over that later. It is a mess. I don't know why the computer is not sending the correct signal, but I have it bypassed right now. But got the fuel pump to kick on, and I saw which one of my 2 lines that was spraying fuel, so I knew that was my input. I came in the bottom of my fuel filter and then came out the top, and I came in this line, and that line goes in to the front of the fuel rail. The fuel rail will then get fuel in it, and it will get over here on the other end of the fuel rail. It comes back around to the fuel pressure regulator. This will hold pressure in the line in the fuel rail. And then this line here coming out is my return, and it comes down, and I have it going into the tube that did not have fuel coming out. And I can make a little bracket that will hold those on there a little bit prettier maybe. This back here there was some emissions junk, and I just bolted on a factory. This is usually on the firewall, on the fender well actually. I just unbolted that from my other truck, and I bolted that onto the intake manifold where some of the emissions bolts in, and now I have fuel. Alright, so going through this harness, this white wire with the red stripe, there is about 4 or 5 of those that go into this computer, and I pinpointed which one it is. It is this one here. You can see it's a couple back from where the bolt is. So that's the fuel wire right there. That is supposed to send a negative signal over to your relay. relay right here. You have a black wire 12-volt positive with key ignition, another black wire, same thing, 12-volt positive with key ignition, and the white wire with the blue stripe will go to the fuel pump. This white wire with the red stripe is supposed to get negative signal from my computer. I'm getting about 8 or 9 volts positive, and I don't know why, but if I trigger that, I just put a screw in here, cut back some of the wire, and I've put that on ground. And now my fuel pressure is good. My battery voltage, I accidentally left this on for like 2 days. So my relays were kicked, and I came out here tonight after work, and I only had about 5 volts in my battery. So I am charging my battery. I was out here working on this last night. I couldn't get it to start. I went ahead, it was like midnight, I called it a night. And I was bleeding brakes and stuff because it just wouldn't start. This morning I came out here and I put this light in. This tests for spark. It won't test your spark plug, but it'll test for spark before the plug. It just goes in line between the plug wire and the plug. I was getting spark, so I really thought that it was in time, so I went ahead and worked on the fuel. What I did is I pulled off the return line for the fuel, and I turned the fuel pump on, and it's barely got a trickle coming out, and I'm wondering if the motor's just been sitting for a while. Maybe something isn't working quite like it should. It just needs to work and free up a little bit. The motor does have a mist to it, and I've got a fuel leak. I've got a vacuum leak, massive vacuum leak. I'm gonna fix the vacuum leak. Seems like there might be another, maybe it was just this. I'm gonna remove this vacuum line right here going up to the intake, air intake box. But it will start and run. I don't have any water going to it, and I have to hit my switch right here still. I'll hit that with my foot. So after the exhaust leak is fixed, we will plug these vacuum lines, and I'll start it and let it run for just another minute. I don't want to let it run for very long at all. I don't want this to get warm. And I'm gonna look at some of these wires, what I can remove. This is emissions, this green one. And there was like 5 over here, 4 or 5. I'm gonna remove these, and then that goes to this. I've got a truck out here. I'm gonna see if I can grab the connector off of that, and the connector for the oil pressure. That wire is right here. No, that is not that wire. It's this wire. This wire will go to the oil pressure. I'm gonna get that one hooked up. I'm gonna cut through this harness and weed out this rear O2. The rear O2 only tells if the catalytic converter is working or not. And I can figure out a place to mount this. Maybe just stick it up in here or something. I'll weed through this one. And then I've removed a lot of wiring. Alright, my fuel pump is still bypassed, and I don't know why. I started this just a few months ago, And it started without having to have this jumper. I may go ahead and cut this wire just so I don't feed negative back into the computer. For some reason I was getting about 8-9 volts, something like that, coming out positive, and that is not cool. I don't know, the computer is supposed to be sending a negative signal to this fuel pump relay. I went ahead and took this, that's out of a 97 Hardbody automatic. I put it in and it was doing the same thing, so it makes me think that I'm missing a ground somewhere. I'm going to go through and check all of that, check all of my grounds, and I don't know, maybe I can get that put back together like it should be. I'll catch you back on later. This was my buddy's truck that he wrecked, and I picked it up from him, and I've got to cut those, all of the nose off and peel it off this motor and see if I can salvage this motor. But I'm gonna see if I can grab some of this harness. What did I need? I needed a oil pressure, and there was another pigtail that I was missing. Might need to go back to my truck and look. But these trucks really take a hit. He broke his leg in 2 places. I've wrecked one a little bit worse than this, and I walked away. I wasn't in good health, but anyway, alright, I will see if I can find my pigtails that I need out of here. Alright, I'm working on this harness. So I went ahead and bolted right here to keep that up out of the way. The fender's going to cover the whole harness right through here. This harness comes down to the O2 sensor, and I'm going to try to make a clamp here on the frame, and maybe some clamps along in here just to hold it. And then I'm going to go ahead and wire loom right here, because that's pretty much done. The headlight I'm going to have to modify, but that's just going to have to, I have to go through the other harness that I had and pull, because these are BMW headlights, and so one of them will be high and low, and one of them will just be a high. And I've only got, of course, just one connector, so I'll have to rewire that. I'm going to go through some of this over here, and up in this engine, I'll pull this nose back off of here, and then go through the actual engine harness. I went ahead and cut all of the loom back. I went ahead and taped this off so that I don't drop anything into my intake. And I cut all of the tape and loom all the way back to here. And I'm just going to have to redo all of that, which is fine. Just get it all nice and clean. So I separated the wiring, and this small harness is what I've got. I'm sorry. This small harness right here is what I've got to run over to here, and I might be able, probably not with the exhaust, it might need to stay up here, but anyway, it would look better if I was able to run it somewhere else. I might be able to run it underneath the intake and come out through here, but I don't know how much that would help. Anyway, so what I've done is I've split all of this out, and I ran these wires down underneath the throttle body, right on top of the intake, and I'm going to remove this big hoop right here of wire. That is my extra. And on this one, this goes to these plugs, and I've got a small hoop of wires that I'm going to eliminate that should be able to get me a smaller harness right here. I can hide it kind of down here low, I hope. And then I was able to remove several wires out of that harness. I just cut them and left them back here. I'm going to tape those up tight right here. That's all emissions plugs. I just weeded them all out from out of here. I've got some more of these on order that will clean that up. Those are fairly inexpensive. I've still got to run my clutch master cylinder. It's going to go under the dash, so I'm going to have to run the line for it somewhere under the carpet or around through here, but I'll figure that out after a while. It is not ready yet. I guess I'm going to do this one first. These gray ones have like a braided steel around it, and it's like a mesh. I may just try to overlap it and tape those back. It's some kind of shielding, probably for sound, or interference. It could be for interference to your radio, or it could be interference to the wire itself, ran next to these other ones. So anyway, wish me luck on that. These other wires will be pretty easy and self-explanatory. I'm gonna go ahead and knock those out. I got all these shortened. Now I'm doing these. So what I did is I just skinned back quite a bit, and then I pulled this back. I just slid it back down, and before I slid that back down, I put some heat shrink tubing down in there, so that whenever I wrap all this back up, I can slide the heat shrink tubing up and cover it all back up. But these will also have to be insulated, so I'm gonna try to cut this back and put some heat shrink tubing on these before I solder the wires together. So I'll solder the wires together and then pull the heat shrink tubing up, heat shrink each wire, and then I will put this around each side together, and then pull this other heat shrink tubing up and then shrink that down. And hopefully this is going to work. We'll see. In my head it works. That's the last of the wires. Got these two soldered. This one just had one inside it. And so now I've pulled this wire on the outside. It was braided around. If it'll focus. So now I'm going to slide this over and then heat shrink that down. Well, it turns out that I did not use a large enough heat shrink tubing on that, so I'm going to use this Scotch 228. That is a masking, or it's electrical tape, but it's really gummy. So what I'm going to do is just gum that around on there. I'll remove that, or didn't matter, heat shrink it down, don't matter. But then once I get this kind of squished around good, I'm going to cover that up with a standard electrical tape, and that will seal it up good, I imagine. So we'll just go with that, and then after that we'll look at these other wires. Finally got all of this put together. What a mess. Alright, and now I'm ready to come in here and get some of this stuff knocked out. Let's see if I can put some loom on this and see if I can find my air conditioner parts, get that put in, the heater core put in, so that I know where I can route these wires. And I just gotta put a positive onto that. to the battery. Alright, I looked at this video and I think it's going to be terribly long, so I'm going to have to maybe break this up. But at this point, I've put the dash back in, just getting everything to line back up. It's kind of a mess. I've got all of this put in, the blower motor and the air conditioner and heater and all the controls for all of that. And just got everything kind of bolted back up. I went ahead and put the plugs that I know where they go, that I had labeled, and some of the plugs go to the rest of the dash and gauges and things. So I'm gonna have to finish that once I get the rest of the dash put together. There is, with this tilt column, there is a problem with some of these connectors are different than some of these connectors. I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do about that. I may just pull the steering wheel off and see if I can swap out this whole control, or figure out how to wire that. I've pulled this back off because I was trying to hook up the throttle cable. The throttle cable is too long, so obviously the V6 and the 4-cylinder throttle cables are different, so I will have to swap out the throttle cable, and I gotta pull that back off. And that was my test light. Turns out I wasn't getting fuel pressure, and I still don't have a fix for that. I still have that bypassed. Anyway, so I'm going to see about putting a throttle cable in, and I'm going to finish up this video here. I just put the wiring kind of where it needs to go for the gauges, kind of draped it around up here. Everything's pretty much fitted. I put this back on the kick panel area right here and put that back together. I've mounted the fuse box. I'm probably going to have to modify some of this, either that or run a separate fuse box. So this white wire with the red stripe goes into the fuel pump relay. That is your negative trigger, and I was getting 5 volts. I gotta see about putting that back on a little bit better. I was getting about 5 or 8 volts of positive instead of a negative, so I bypassed this wire. I just cut a little piece and I put a screw in there, and I had a bypass to make my fuel pump kick on. But for some reason now it's working with the key. Doesn't make sense. But I just popped these 2 fuses. These are 100 amp fuses, and I had those going to the motor. That is obviously not enough because they just blew out. So I went in here and I put in 2 125 amp fuses. Alright, so you'll wish me luck for the rest of this, because I have about 30 days to finish this completely. Probably not going to happen. I'm probably just going to have to take this to the show unfinished. I don't really want to rush it and it not be perfect. As perfect as I can get it. Alright, so like or subscribe or whatever, and I will see you on the next video.